The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. But what happens when something arrives that exists outside that binding, a void in the Force, wrapped in darkness and determination? The Empire would soon learn that some shadows answer to no master, light or dark. The streak of burning metal tore through Coruscant's upper atmosphere at 0300 hours, screaming past traffic lanes and skyscraper spires before slamming into an abandoned warehouse district in level 3204. No hyperdrive signature, no transponder codes. Imperial traffic control registered the anomaly 3 seconds after impact, and within minutes, stormtroopers surrounded the crash site with E-11 blasters raised and searchlights cutting through the smoke. Inside the wreckage, Bruce Wayne opened his eyes to a shattered cockpit canopy and sparking systems. The Batwing, what remained of it, groaned around him as repulsor stabilizers failed one by one. His heads-up display flickered with error messages and languages he didn't recognize, overlaid with star charts that made no astronomical sense. Pain lanced through his ribs where the crash harness had dug in, but he'd survived worse. He always did. Through the smoke, he saw them. White-armored soldiers advancing in formation, weapons trained on his position. Not GCPD, not military contractors. Their armor was too uniform, too advanced. And the insignia on their shoulders, a gear-like symbol he'd never seen, marked them as something organized and authoritarian. Bruce's mind cataloged details automatically: tactics, equipment, discipline, professional, dangerous, target acquired, unknown vessel, level 3204 Alpha. Approaching with caution. The voice crackled through external speakers, mechanical and cold. Bruce reached for his utility belt, fingers finding the familiar weight of smoke pellets, EMP charges, and grapnel launcher. The suit's armor plating had absorbed most of the impact, though diagnostics warned of compromised seals in the left gauntlet and reduced power reserves. He'd need to recalibrate everything, but first, escape. The soldiers closed in, their weapons emitting a faint whine he recognized as charging energy cells. Not ballistic, directed energy weapons. He'd faced similar tech in encounters with LexCorp prototypes, but never this widespread or standardized. Whoever these people were, they had resources. Bruce kicked open the canopy hatch and rolled into the shadows as blaster fire, he'd later learn the term, scorched the air where he'd been. Red bolts of superheated plasma punched through durasteel like paper, and his instincts screamed danger with every shot. He deployed smoke pellets mid-roll, gray clouds erupting across the warehouse floor as he vanished into the skeletal framework of abandoned machinery. Contact lost. Deploying thermal scanners. They adapted quickly. Bruce vaulted over a rusted conveyor belt, cape billowing as he processed his situation. Unknown planet. Unknown jurisdiction. Unknown tech level, clearly beyond Earth's current capabilities. The architecture suggested a massive urban center, perhaps planetary in scale, based on the endless cityscape he'd glimpsed during descent. He needed information. Intel. A safe house. But first, he needed to disappear. A stormtrooper squad swept through the smoke, their helmets' visual sensors cutting through the haze with infrared overlays. They moved in pairs, covering angles with practiced efficiency. Bruce waited in the rafters above, controlling his breathing, watching their patrol patterns. 12 total. 2 squads. One commander barking orders from a mobile command unit outside. He dropped silently behind the rearmost pair, gauntlets striking nerve clusters with surgical precision. Both soldiers collapsed without a sound, armor clattering against permacrete. Bruce dragged them into the shadows, examining their equipment. The helmets contained communication arrays and sophisticated HUD systems, military-grade. But the operating language was completely foreign. Not Russian, not Mandarin, something else entirely. Orex Squad, report status. Bruce pressed himself against a support column as the remaining troops converged on his position. They were learning his patterns, adjusting their formation to counter hit and run. Tactics. Good. That meant they were trained, but also predictable. He triggered an EMP charge near their command unit, and the electromagnetic pulse rippled outward, then fizzled weakly, barely disrupting their communications. Wrong frequency. Wrong energy signature. The Empire's technology operated on principles his Earth-based countermeasures weren't designed for. Bruce filed that information away and moved. The warehouse had dozens of exits, most sealed by Imperial order, but one maintenance shaft still gaped open near the south wall. He fired his grapnel launcher. Thank God some things still worked, and the cable caught a corroded beam. He swung over the advancing soldiers, cape spreading like wings, and heard their panicked shouts as he vanished into the shaft. It's like a shadow. Negative visual on target. Command, we need reinforcements. This is not a standard smuggler or rebel operative. Bruce crawled through the maintenance tunnel, emerging 3 blocks away, onto a skyway platform teeming with strange beings, aliens, dozens of species he'd never seen, moving through the crowds with the casual indifference of daily commuters, towering insectoids, tentacled creatures in breathing apparatus. Humans, but their dress and technology marked them as utterly foreign. Above, massive star destroyers hung in the sky like daggers, their triangular hulls bristling with weapons and hangar bays. Patrol craft screamed past on patrol routes, searchlights sweeping the lower levels. This wasn't just a city. This was an empire, and he'd just made himself a target. Bruce pulled his cape tight and merged with the crowd, heading deeper into the urban labyrinth. Somewhere in this impossible galaxy, there were answers. He would find them. He always did. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. But first, he needed to understand what kind of empire hunted shadows with such dedication, and why their soldiers were the mark of absolute control. The Imperial Security Bureau filed their report within the hour. Unidentified intruder. Advanced combat capabilities. Possible rebel, insurgent, or force-sensitive in hiding. The file landed on the desk of an inquisitor within minutes, and the hunt began in earnest. Bruce spent his first day on Coruscant learning the rhythms of a planet that never slept. From a commandeered observation point in an abandoned residential tower on level 2847, he watched the city's arteries pulse with traffic, speeders, and cargo haulers flowing in designated lanes that stretched from the planet's surface to orbital space. Everything moved with mechanical precision, governed by imperial regulations that controlled every aspect of life. He'd seen authoritarian regimes before, but nothing on this scale. This was oppression as infrastructure. His suit's computer had partially adapted to local networks, piggybacking on open communication channels to download data. The language was called Galactic Basic, and the translation algorithms in his cowl were learning it word by word. Enough to understand Galactic Empire, Emperor Palpatine, Coruscant, Capital World, and something called the Force, a mystical energy that supposedly connected all living things. The Jedi were dead, hunted to extinction 19 years ago in something called Order 66. Their hunters still operated, Inquisitors, Force wielders pledged to the dark side, searching for survivors and anyone who might threaten the Emperor's absolute rule. And they were looking for him. Bruce caught the first sign at dusk, a presence in the crowds below, too deliberate, too focused. A figure in black armor moved through the skylanes with predatory intent, and beings scattered from their path with fear that went beyond simple authority. The Inquisitor's helmet swept the area with methodical precision, one hand resting on a cylindrical weapon at their belt. Batman withdrew deeper into the shadows, slowing his breathing, becoming still as stone. The Inquisitor paused directly below his position, head tilting as if listening to something beyond hearing. Bruce recognized that posture, a hunter sensing prey through means that transcended normal senses. He'd faced Ra's al Ghul's assassins who claimed similar awareness. But this felt different. Older, more primal. I sense nothing, the Inquisitor muttered, voice distorted through their helmet's vocabulator. A void, an absence in the Force. The hunter moved on, but Bruce understood the implication. Whatever this force was, he didn't register within it. To these Inquisitors, he was a blind spot, a gap in their supernatural perception. That could be an advantage, or a reason for them to hunt him even harder. He needed resources, intel, and most importantly, he needed to understand the power structure he was operating within. The Black Sun's territory began at level 2200 and stretched down into Coruscant's industrial underbelly. Bruce had located their operations through simple detective work, following the flow of illegal goods, tracking protection racket payments, identifying the patterns of organized crime that existed in every city, on every world. Some things were universal. He'd chosen his entry point carefully, a warehouse processing smuggled spice and black market weapons. For guards outside, a dozen inside, and a falling crime lord named Zist who controlled this sector's information networks. Bruce watched from the shadows as a shipment of blaster rifles changed hands, credits exchanged in secured datapads, and guards joked about the latest Imperial crackdown on rebel sympathizers. He dropped from the rafters like a specter. The first guard went down to a nerve strike before his brain registered movement. The second managed to raise his blaster before Batman's gauntlet struck his wrist, the weapon clattering to the floor as a boot sweep took his legs out. Screams erupted as Bruce moved through the warehouse like liquid shadow, his cape creating the illusion of impossible size and presence. What is that thing? Shoot it. Shoot. Blaster fire ripped through cargo containers, superheated plasma singing the air. Bruce rolled behind a stack of supply crates, analyzing the weapon's firing patterns. Slower recharge than he'd expected, approximately 1.2 seconds between shots for standard models. Exploitable. He triggered a flashbang, one of his few remaining. Earth munitions, and the warehouse erupted in blinding light and concussive sound. When their vision cleared, Batman stood in the center of the room, surrounded by unconscious smugglers, his silhouette backlit by emergency lighting. Zist fumbled for a holdout blaster, but Bruce was already there, one hand pinning the Falene's wrist to the desk, while the other produced a batarang that gleamed in the dim light. Information, Batman growled, voice modulated to resonate with menace. I need everything you know about the Empire, their operations, their weaknesses, their enemies. Zist's reptilian features twisted in fear. You're not with the ISB, not an Inquisitor. What are you? Your only chance of walking away from this conscious. The batarang pressed against Zist's throat, not breaking skin, but promising capability. Talk. The Falene's survival instincts overrode his criminal pride. Information spilled out in panicked bursts. The Empire's stranglehold on commerce, their brutal suppression of dissent, the Rebel Alliance operating from hidden bases, the Emperor's dark powers that made even crime lords whisper in fear, and the Inquisitorious, force wielders who hunted anyone who might threaten Imperial order, especially those who left strange voids in their mystical perception. There's a price on unusual force signatures, Zist gasped. 10,000 credits for information leading to capture. They're already spreading word about something that crashed in the upper levels, something that doesn't register right. Bruce released him, stepping back into shadow. You're going to forget this conversation. If anyone asks, you were robbed by a standard thief. Nothing more. And if I don't, a batarang embedded itself in the wall next to Zist's head, its edges gleaming with promise. Then I'll remember where you sleep. Batman vanished into the warehouse's maintenance systems, leaving Zist to contemplate his extremely generous survival. But Bruce had learned what he needed. The Empire was absolute. The rebels were desperate, and he was now a target for hunters who could sense the Force itself. 3 days into his investigation, Batman intercepted a rebel courier in the lower industrial sectors. The woman, a human in her 30s with the hard eyes of a veteran soldier, had been making dead drops in abandoned factories, leaving intelligence for Alliance operatives. Bruce had been tracking Imperial patrol patterns when he'd noticed her. Counter-surveillance techniques. Professional. Trained. She never saw him coming. Don't scream, he said from the shadows behind her. I'm not Imperial. The courier spun, blaster drawn, but froze when she saw his silhouette. What in the blazes are you? Someone who needs answers about the rebellion. And you're going to provide them. Her finger tightened on the trigger. I don't talk to strangers, especially not ones dressed like Sith apprentices. The Empire killed the Jedi, enslaves entire systems, rules through fear. Bruce stepped into the dim light, letting her see his armor, his cape, the determination in his eyes. I'm not your enemy, but I need to know if the rebellion is any better, or just another organization willing to sacrifice principles for victory. The courier studied him for a long moment. and something in his tone must have reached her. She lowered the blaster slightly. The rebellion fights for freedom, for the republic that once was. We don't target civilians. We don't rule through fear. And we sure as hell don't blow up planets. Alderaan. Her jaw tightened. You know about that? I make it my business to know. Bruce had accessed Imperial archives through a combination of hacking and physical infiltration. The Death Star's destruction of an entire world had been documented with clinical efficiency, filed as a successful demonstration of Imperial power. 2 billion lives gone. The Empire is evil. That much is clear. The question is whether the rebellion's methods are worth supporting, or if they'll become what they fight. The courier holstered her weapon. Come with me. There's someone you should meet. Someone who'll give you the answers you're looking for if you're willing to listen. Batman nodded slowly. He'd come to this galaxy by accident, crashed into a war he hadn't chosen. But the detective in him demanded the truth. All of it, before he decided which side, if any, deserved his help. The Inquisitor's report reached the Executor that evening. An anomaly persists on Coruscant, a void in the force that moves with purpose, disrupts Imperial operations, and evades capture. Recommend escalation to higher authority. In his meditation chamber aboard the Superstar Destroyer, Darth Vader read the report with interest. A being that existed outside the Force. Impossible. Yet the Inquisitorius did not make mistakes in such matters. He would investigate personally. The rebel safe house occupied 3 floors of an abandoned textile factory on level 1313, deep enough in Coruscant's underbelly that Imperial patrols came only when absolutely necessary. The courier, she'd given her name as Senna, led Batman through a maze of service, tunnels, and forgotten passages. Her path chosen to avoid surveillance cameras and sensor grids. She was good, not quite League of Assassins caliber, but trained by someone who understood operational security. Bruce cataloged every turn, every landmark, building a mental map of the route. Old habits. Trust was earned, not given. And he'd learned long ago that allies could become enemies when circumstances changed. The safe house entrance was concealed behind a false wall panel that required a specific knock pattern. The door slid open to reveal a converted warehouse space lit by dim glow rods, where a dozen beings, humans and aliens, alike, worked at makeshift stations monitoring Imperial communications, assembling weapons, and coordinating supply runs. Every face turned when Batman entered, and the room fell silent. A Duros with deep blue skin stepped forward, his large red eyes narrowing. Senna, what is this? You were supposed to maintain protocol, not bring strangers to. He intercepted me clean. Vecker, Senna interrupted. No sound, no warning. If he'd been ISB, we'd already be in binders. She gestured to Batman. And he knows about Alderaan, about the Death Star. He's been gathering intelligence on the Empire for days. Vecker's hand moved to the blaster at his hip. That doesn't make him an ally. Could be a new Inquisitor trick. Could be. I'm not with the Empire, Bruce said, voice cutting through the tension with quiet authority. And I'm not here to join your rebellion. I'm here to understand what kind of war you're fighting, and whether your methods are worth supporting. A Twi'lek woman stood from her station, her blue leku twitching with irritation. Worth supporting? The Empire murdered 2 billion people to make a point. They enslave my homeworld. They hunt children who show force sensitivity. And you question whether we're worth supporting? I question everyone, Batman replied. The Empire's atrocities don't automatically make the rebellion righteous. I've seen too many revolutions become the tyranny they claim to fight. He stepped further into the room, letting them see him clearly. The armor, the cape, the symbol on his chest. I need to know, do you target civilians? Do you use terror tactics? Do you execute prisoners? The room erupted in angry muttering, but Vecker raised a hand for silence. We fight soldiers, Imperial military installations, supply depots. We sabotage their war machine, not their people. His voice hardened. But make no mistake, this is war. People die. Sometimes innocents get caught in the crossfire. We minimize it, but we can't eliminate it. Bruce nodded slowly. Honest, at least. And after you win, if you win, what happens to Imperial loyalists? The stormtroopers who were conscripted? The bureaucrats who kept the machine running? Trials, Senna said firmly. Justice. not revenge. That's what Senator Organa preaches. That's what Commander Mothma demands of every cell. She met Batman's gaze directly. We're trying to rebuild the Republic, not create another empire with a different flag. Trying isn't succeeding. No, Vecker admitted. But it's all we have. Hope and effort and blood. He crossed his arms. So what are you, stranger? Some kind of warrior monk? An alien mercenary? You move like a Jedi, but leave no trace in the Force. The Inquisitors are going mad trying to track you. I'm someone who's fought for justice in my own city for years. Someone who's seen what happens when the powerful abuse those who can't defend themselves. Bruce gestured to the equipment around the room. Show me your operations, your targets, your rules of engagement. Prove to me that the rebellion is what it claims to be. Over the next 6 hours, they did exactly that. Vecker pulled up holographic displays showing Alliance operations across the galaxy, precision strikes on Imperial weapons facilities, rescues of political prisoners, intelligence gathering on fleet movements. They showed him casualty reports where rebel commanders had aborted missions rather than risk civilian deaths. They showed him the chain of command, the oversight, the attempts, however imperfect, to maintain moral high ground against an empire with no such constraints. Batman listened, questioned, probed for inconsistencies, and found an organization that was genuinely trying, despite impossible odds and limited resources, to fight a war with honor. But he also saw the cracks, the desperation, the knowledge that conventional warfare against the Empire's overwhelming military might was a losing proposition. He saw it in Senna's eyes when she mentioned the Death Star, the fear that another such weapon might exist, might already be under construction. He saw it in Vecker's tense shoulders when discussing supply shortages and lost cells. The rebellion was righteous, but righteousness didn't guarantee victory. There's an Imperial data center on level 1850, Batman said after reviewing their intelligence gaps. Security station processing surveillance from the lower levels. You need that data to identify compromised safe houses and track Inquisitor movements. Vecker's eyes widened. That facility has 40 stormtroopers, automated defenses, and triple redundant security. We've been planning an assault for months, but the casualties would be. I'll go alone. Tonight. Have a datapad, ready to receive encrypted transmissions. That's suicide, Senna protested. Even if you breach the perimeter, the moment alarms trigger, they'll lock down the entire sector. You'd be trapped. Batman's expression didn't change. I've infiltrated more secure facilities than this. The Empire's defenses are sophisticated, but they rely on patterns. Patterns can be exploited. He spent the remaining daylight hours preparing. His suit's systems had adapted further to Coruscant's technology, interfaces syncing with Imperial network protocols through brute force decryption. The EMP charges were recalibrated for galactic energy signatures, not perfect, but functional. His grapnel launcher worked flawlessly, though he'd need to fabricate new lines soon. The batarangs were down to 9. Every resource had to be used with precision. As night fell over Coruscant, or what passed for night on a planet where artificial lights never dimmed, Batman stood on a ledge overlooking the data center. The facility was a hardened bunker built into the side of a massive support column. Its entrances guarded by stormtrooper patrols and automated turrets. Sensor grids covered every approach. Motion detectors, thermal scanners, pressure plates, all designed to catch conventional infiltrators. Bruce launched himself into the void between buildings, capes spreading to guide his descent through the vertical cityscape. He fired the grapnel mid-fall, swinging across a traffic lane as speeders streaked past, then released to drop onto a maintenance catwalk 3 levels above the data center. Stormtroopers patrolled below, their white armor stark against the durasteel walls, moving in timed patterns he'd memorized from an hour of observation. 60 seconds between patrol passes, 30 seconds to cross the open courtyard, 20 seconds to bypass the door security. He moved. The grapnel carried him silently to the facility's roof, where ventilation systems offered entry. Points too small for armored soldiers, but adequate for someone trained in contortion and infiltration. Batman removed the grate with careful precision, lowering himself into the ductwork as voices echoed from below. Another sweep of the lower levels turned up nothing. Command thinks this shadow operative might have fled off-world. Good. Inquisitors give me the creeps. Rather deal with rebel scum than Force users. Bruce crawled through the ventilation system, following the facility's layout heat, reconstructed from external observation and stolen schematics. The data center's server core would be on the third sublevel, protected by biometric locks and armed guards. Standard infiltration. He'd done this 1,000 times in Gotham. Except Gotham didn't have Inquisitors who could sense intentions through mystical energy. The third brother felt at the moment he entered the facility a disturbance in the Force that manifested as absolute absence. Not darkness, not light, nothing. A void that moved with purpose through the data center's upper levels. Invisible to conventional sensors, but screaming its presence to anyone attuned to the Force's currents. He ignited his double-bladed lightsaber, crimson plasma humming to life, and smiled beneath his helmet. Found you. Batman dropped from the ventilation shaft into the server room, immediately noting the layout, rows of data terminals, 3 technicians at workstations, 2 stormtroopers by the door. He deployed smoke pellets as he landed, gray clouds erupting across the chamber as panicked shouts echoed from the technicians. Intruder! Sound the Bruce silenced the first guard with a precise strike to the helmet's weak point at the neck seal, the stormtrooper collapsing without firing a shot. The second guard managed to raise his blaster before a batarang struck his weapon hand, the E-11 clattering to the floor as Batman swept his legs out and delivered a knockout blow. The technicians scrambled for the exits. Batman let them go. They were civilians, not combatants. He moved to the central terminal and plugged in the data spike the rebels had provided, initiating the download sequence. Imperial security protocols fought against the intrusion, but Bruce's algorithms were relentless, breaking through layers of encryption with brute force processing. 60 seconds. He needed 60 seconds. The door exploded inward, and the third brother strode through the smoke with his lightsaber raised, the crimson blades casting hellish light across the server room. You reek of nothing, the Inquisitor hissed. An aberration. The Force does not recognize you, which makes you dangerous. Batman faced him, hands empty, analyzing the threat. The weapon, a lightsaber, based on intel he'd gathered, was pure plasma contained in a magnetic field, cutting power measured in thousands of degrees. The wielder moved with supernatural grace, connected to this force that permeated the galaxy. I don't want to fight, Batman said evenly. Leave now, and you walk away. The Inquisitor laughed. Bold words from a man with no connection to the Force. He spun his lightsaber in a flourish, the technique designed to intimidate. You cannot win. Surrender, and I promise the Emperor will study you before your execution. 40 seconds. Batman's hand moved to his utility belt as the Inquisitor lunged, lightsaber carving through the air with lethal precision. Bruce rolled aside, the plasma blade melting a server terminal where he'd stood, and hurled a cryo capsule directly at the Inquisitor's face. The capsule shattered on impact, releasing a burst of rapid freezing compound that coated the third brother's helmet in ice. The Inquisitor staggered, momentarily blinded, and Batman pressed the advantage. He couldn't match the Force, but he could match combat technique. His strikes targeted joints in the armor, weak points, anything to slow the opponent down. A boot to the knee, an elbow to the spine, movement patterns designed to flow around the lightsaber's reach. But the Inquisitor was fast, impossibly fast, and the Force guided his movements with precognitive awareness. The lightsaber swept horizontally, and Batman barely ducked beneath it, feeling heat sear across his cowl as the blade passed millimeters from his skull. 20 seconds. The third brother recovered. Ice shattered from his helmet and raised his free hand. Batman felt invisible force grip his chest, telekinesis. His mind cataloged and lift him off the ground. The sensation was suffocating, pressure building as the Inquisitor smiled beneath his mask. Struggle all you want. You are nothing without the Force. Batman triggered the high-voltage charge in his gauntlets, technology designed to incapacitate metahumans in Gotham, and the electrical current surged through the telekinetic grip. The Inquisitor screamed, his concentration breaking as electricity arced across his armor, and Bruce dropped to the floor. 10 seconds. He grabbed the data spike from the terminal, download complete, and fired. his grapnel at the ventilation shaft. The line caught, and he rocketed upward as the Inquisitor recovered, lightsaber carving through the cable half a second too late. Batman crashed through the shafts grating and rolled onto the roof as alarms blared throughout the facility. The third brother stood in the server room, staring at the void where his prey had escaped, and activated his comm link with trembling fingers. This is third brother. I encountered the anomaly. It fought back, injured me. There was a long pause before the response came. Cold and mechanical. Lord Vader will be most interested in your failure. The third brother felt fear, true fear, for the first time in years. Batman delivered the data strike to the rebel safe house 3 hours later, disappearing into the night before they could thank him. The intelligence was solid, compromised cells, Inquisitor patrol routes, ISB surveillance patterns. Everything the rebellion needed to protect their operations and save lives. Vecker stared at the data scrolling across his terminal, then looked at Senna with something approaching awe. He did it. Alone. Against an Inquisitor. He's not like anyone I've ever seen, Senna murmured. Not Jedi. Not Sith. Something else entirely. In his commandeered observation post, Bruce treated the burn across his cowl where the lightsaber had grazed him. The proximity to plasma had melted the armor's outer layer but hadn't penetrated. Lucky. Against. A more skilled opponent. Against. This Darth Vader. The intelligence mentioned, luck wouldn't be enough. He'd proven the rebellion was worth protecting. Their cause was just, their methods measured. But that didn't mean he'd fight their war. Not yet. Not until he understood the full scope of the conflict and what victory would truly cost. Outside, the lights of Coruscant burned eternal. And somewhere in the darkness, an Inquisitor reported his failure to the Dark Lord of the Sith. The game had changed, and Batman knew games like this never ended peacefully. The Executor arrived in Coruscant orbit 3 days later, its massive wedge-shaped hull blotting out stars as it settled into high anchor above the Imperial Palace. Darth Vader disembarked without ceremony, his cape billowing as he strode through the palace corridors with singular purpose. Stormtroopers and officers alike pressed themselves against walls as he passed, feeling the weight of the dark side emanating from him like radiation. The Emperor had granted permission for this hunt personally. Batman knew something had changed when Imperial activity intensified across the city. Patrols doubled. Checkpoints appeared on previously unmonitored skylanes. The Inquisitorius swept through the lower levels with renewed aggression, their black-armored forms visible on every major thoroughfare. The Empire was tightening its grip, and he was the reason. He'd spent the last 72 hours gathering intelligence on his new hunter. Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, right hand of the Emperor, former Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker, turned to darkness during the Purge 19 years ago, master of the Force with power that made the Inquisitors look like children, responsible for hunting down and exterminating the Jedi Order, and utterly, terrifyingly effective. Bruce reviewed holographic footage, salvaged from Rebel intelligence. Vader deflecting blaster fire with casual gestures, crushing throats with telekinetic pressure, cutting through blast doors with his crimson lightsaber as if they were paper. Every movement spoke of absolute confidence, martial mastery honed over decades, and connection to the Force so deep it bordered on supernatural omniscience. This wasn't like facing Bane or Deathstroke. This was something that transcended human limitation entirely. But even gods could bleed. Bruce had proven that before. The summons came through Vecker's encrypted channel. Alliance Command wants to meet you. They've heard about the data center raid, about what you did to the third brother. The Duros's voice carried equal parts hope and trepidation. They think you could be a major asset. But there's something else. Vader's on Coruscant, hunting you specifically. Batman stood on a rain-slicked ledge overlooking level 2400, letting precipitation cascade off his cape as he considered the implications. Meeting Alliance Command meant deeper involvement. It meant choosing a side in a galactic war that wasn't his fight. But it also meant resources, intelligence networks, and potential allies against a threat that even he couldn't face unprepared. Set the meeting, he said finally. Neutral location. I choose the route. Agreed. Coordinates incoming. And Batman. Vecker paused. Thank you. The intelligence you recovered saved 17 cells from ISB raids. Hundreds of lives. Bruce didn't respond. Gratitude made him uncomfortable, always had. He did what needed doing, nothing more. But as he grappled toward the coordinates, he couldn't ignore the weight settling on his shoulders. Every action in this galaxy had consequences that rippled across star systems. In Gotham, his war was contained, personal. Here, a single choice could affect billions. The meeting location was an abandoned observatory on Coruscant's polar cap, far from the city's endless sprawl. Alliance Command had chosen well, isolated, defensible, with clear sight lines in all directions. Batman approached from an unexpected angle, scaling the exterior and entering through a maintenance hatch to avoid the obvious entrances. Inside, two figures waited beside a holographic projector. The first was human, a woman in her 60s with white hair and bearing that spoke of political power. Mon Mothma, his research indicated. Senator in exile, one of the rebellion's founding leaders. The second was Abad Han, his tan fur immaculately groomed, golden eyes sharp with intelligence. Borsk Phalia, intelligence coordinator. You're even more cautious than reported. Mon Mothma observed as Batman emerged from the shadows. Good. Paranoia keeps one alive in our profession. I prefer thorough, Bruce replied, scanning the room for threats, exits, surveillance devices. Clean. They'd honored the neutral ground agreement. You wanted to meet. I'm here. Phalia activated the holographic projector, and a galactic map shimmered into existence between them. Red markers indicated Imperial strongholds. Blue marked rebel bases. Yellow showed contested systems. The Empire dominated at least 80% of known space. We're losing, Mon Mothma said without preamble. Not quickly, not obviously, but steadily. The Emperor tightens his grip on every system, and we lack the resources to fight conventionally. Our hope lies in precision strikes, intelligence victories, and symbols that inspire resistance. She looked directly at Batman. You've become such a symbol in 3 days. A shadow that the Empire cannot catch. An operative who infiltrated a secured facility and fought an Inquisitor to a standstill. I didn't win that fight, Batman said flatly. I escaped. There's a difference. A difference the Empire fears, Phalia interjected, his tone calculating. They've deployed Vader himself. That level of response indicates you're more than a nuisance, you're a genuine threat to their control narrative. Mon Mothma stepped closer. We're not asking you to join the rebellion as a soldier. We're asking you to continue doing what you do best, gathering intelligence, disrupting Imperial operations, being the shadow they cannot predict or contain. In exchange, we provide resources, safe houses, intelligence support, and extraction if needed. Bruce considered the offer. Alliance without full commitment. Freedom to operate independently while supporting a just cause. It aligned with his methods, surgical strikes against tyranny, minimal casualties, maximum disruption. But there was a cost. There was always a cost. If I work with you, I have conditions, Batman said. No suicide missions. No operations that target civilians. No collateral damage you're unwilling to prevent. And if I determine the rebellion has compromised its principles, I walk away. Acceptable, Mon Mothma replied immediately. We fight for freedom, not vengeance. That distinction matters. One more thing. Bruce pulled up his cowl's holographic display, projecting data from the stolen Imperial files. Your intelligence indicates the Empire is constructing something. In the Outer Rim. Project designation. Tarkin Doctrine implementation phase. 2. What is it? The color drained from Mon Mothma's face. Phalia's fur bristled with visible alarm. We don't know, Mon Mothma admitted. But after Alderaan, if they're building another Death Star, or something worse, she steadied herself. That's precisely the kind of intelligence we need. The kind only someone with your skills might obtain. Before Batman could respond, his cowl's sensors screamed warning. Massive object descending. Energy signature consistent with Imperial shuttle. Distance, 3 kilometers, and closing. We've been compromised, Phalia snarled, reaching for his blaster. ISB must have tracked. Not ISB. Batman interrupted, his voice cold. Vader. The Lambda-class shuttle descended through Coruscant's atmosphere like a harbinger, its wings folding upward as repulsor lifts engaged for landing. The craft settled on the observatory's landing platform with mechanical precision, and the boarding ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics. Darth Vader emerged, his black armor gleaming in the polar lights. Crimson lightsaber ignited and burning against the darkness. He moved with deliberate slowness, each step resonating with presence that seemed to warp reality around him. The force radiated from him like heat from a star, oppressive, inescapable, absolute. Run, Batman ordered Mon Mothma and Phalia. I'll buy you time. Against Vader? That's not negotiable. Bruce stepped between them and the approaching Sith Lord, cape spreading as he dropped into combat stance. Go. Now. They ran. Smart. Mon Mothma and Phalia activated emergency beacons as they fled toward a hidden speeder, leaving Batman alone to face the Dark Lord of the Sith. Vader stopped 10 meters away, his mechanical breathing the only sound beyond wind howling across the polar ice. You are the anomaly, he stated, voice resonating with mechanical distortion and dark power. A void in the Force, an impossibility made manifest. I've been called worse, Batman replied, analyzing his opponent. The armor was life support. He could hear respirators, see monitoring systems integrated into the chest plate. Vulnerable points, if he could reach them. The lightsaber moved with casual mastery, technique refined through decades of combat. The Force gave Vader precognition, telekinesis, and supernatural awareness. This was going to hurt. You fought the third brother and survived, Vader continued, circling slowly. Impressive for one with no connection to the Force. But I am not an Inquisitor. I am Sith, and you will tell me how you came to this galaxy before I end you. I don't answer to tyrants. Vader's lightsaber hummed. Then you will suffer. The Dark Lord raised his hand, and Batman felt invisible pressure crush his chest, telekinetic force far beyond what the Inquisitor had demonstrated. His armor's plating groaned under the strain as he was lifted off the ground, ribs creaking, lungs struggling for air. This wasn't a test. This was execution. Bruce triggered every defensive measure simultaneously. EMP charge. Vader's lightsaber flickered but remained active. Smoke pellets. The Sith Lord simply waved them away with a gesture. Flashbang. Vader didn't even flinch, his helmet's optics compensating instantly. Futile, Vader intoned, tightening his grip. Batman's vision blurred, oxygen deprivation setting in, but his mind remained sharp. Analyze. Adapt. Survive. The telekinesis required concentration. The armor required life support. The Force required something. Focus. Intent. Will. He fired the grapnel launcher not at Vader, but at the observatory's main support column. The line caught, and the motorized winch engaged, pulling Batman's body sideways against the telekinetic grip. The sudden shift disrupted Vader's concentration for a fraction of a second, and Bruce dropped, gasping for air. He rolled behind a Durasteel support beam as Vader's lightsaber carved through where he'd fallen. Superheated plasma melted metal like wax, forcing Batman to keep moving, keep dodging, denying the Sith Lord a stationary target. He threw batarangs, Vader deflected them with the Force. He deployed an explosive gel charge. On a support column, Vader sensed the trap and destroyed it with a gesture before it could detonate. Resourceful, Vader acknowledged, advancing with relentless purpose, but ultimately insufficient. Batman's tactical computer ran probability scenarios. Direct combat, 0% survival. Extended engagement, resources depleting, armor damaged. Escape, blocked by Vader's shuttle and Imperial reinforcements inbound. Victory, impossible without exploiting a fundamental weakness. The life support, the armor, the mechanical breathing that never stopped. Bruce launched himself at Vader with apparent recklessness, closing the distance faster than expected. The lightsaber swept toward his midsection. He twisted midair, the blade passing centimeters from his spine, and landed directly in front of the Sith Lord. His gauntlet struck the chest plate's central control matrix, high-voltage charge designed for metahumans, surging directly into Vader's life support systems. Electricity arced across black armor, and for one moment, Darth Vader's breathing hitched. Then the Dark Lord seized Batman's throat with his prosthetic hand and lifted him bodily off the ground. You dare, Vader hissed, and his rage manifested as physical pressure that made the air itself feel heavy. You dare strike at my weakness. Bold, foolish, fatal. The lightsaber angled toward Batman's chest, plasma humming with lethal promise. Bruce's hands grasped Vader's wrist, but the cybernetic strength was overwhelming. This was it. No escape. No trick. No. A missile streaked across the observatory platform and impacted Vader's position, the explosion erupting in fire and concussive force. The Sith Lord staggered, his grip releasing as he was driven back by the blast. Batman fell hard, rolled, and looked up to see an Alliance gunship hovering overhead, its weapons systems locked on Vader. "Get in," Senna shouted from the open side door, extending a hand. Batman fired his grapnel, the line catching the gunship's hull, and activated the winch. He rocketed upward as Vader recovered, lightsaber carving through the air where Batman had stood. The Sith Lord raised his hand, reaching out with the Force to drag the gunship from the sky. Mon Mothma's voice crackled over the comm. "All batteries, fire now." Hidden rebel artillery positions across the polar region opened fire simultaneously, ion cannons and turbolaser batteries targeting Vader's shuttle and forcing the Dark Lord to choose between pursuing Batman and protecting his only transport. Vader's mechanical breathing accelerated, fury, calculation, and he deflected the incoming fire with sweeping gestures. Force manipulation redirecting energy blasts away from the Lambda-class craft. The gunship accelerated into Coruscant's traffic lanes, and Batman pulled himself aboard, collapsing against the interior wall as medics rushed forward. Every rib ached. His throat bore bruises from cybernetic fingers. The cowl sensors were damaged, display flickering. But he was alive. "That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen," Senna said, her voice equal parts awe and terror. "You went toe-to-toe with Vader. Nobody does that and survives." "I didn't survive through skill," Batman rasped. "I survived because you risked an entire cell to save me." Mon Mothma's orders. She said anyone who'd stand alone against Vader for the rebellion's leaders was someone worth saving. Senna offered him a canteen of water. "Welcome to the Alliance, Batman." Officially, through the gunship's viewport, Batman saw Imperial fighters scrambling to pursue, and beyond them, the endless cityscape of Coruscant, a galaxy's capital, ruled by tyranny and darkness. He'd come here by accident, crashed into a war he didn't choose. But he'd learned something crucial in that confrontation with Vader. The Empire's greatest weapon wasn't the Death Star or the Stormtrooper legions. It was fear, the certainty that resistance was futile against overwhelming power. Batman had built a career on subverting that certainty, on proving that even gods could be challenged. Vader would remember this encounter, would hunt him with renewed focus, would dedicate the Empire's resources to eliminating the Void in the force that had dared strike back. Let him come. Bruce Wayne had faced monsters before. This one just happened to command Star Destroyers. In his meditation chamber aboard the Executor, Vader stood before the panoramic viewport, watching Coruscant's lights glitter below. The anomaly had escaped, had wounded him, however briefly, had demonstrated capability beyond what should be possible for one disconnected from the Force. The Emperor would want this being captured, studied, broken. Vader had other priorities. "Captain," he said into his comlink, "increase bounty on the Shadow Operative to 1 million credits. Alive. I wish to understand. What kind of will sustains one who exists outside the Force's dominion?" "Yes, Lord Vader." The Sith Lord deactivated the communication and returned his gaze to the city below. Somewhere in that vast metropolis, the anomaly prepared for their inevitable second encounter, as did Vader. And when they met again, there would be no interruptions, no escape, only the question of whether will alone could stand against the darkness. Vader suspected he already knew the answer. The Alliance moved Batman to a hidden base on one of Coruscant's uncharted moons, a converted mining facility, buried beneath kilometers of regolith, its existence scrubbed from Imperial records decades ago. Here, away from the Inquisitor's hunting grounds and Vader's reach, Bruce spent 2 weeks recovering and preparing for what he knew was inevitable. A final confrontation with the Dark Lord. His ribs healed slowly despite the Alliance's Bacta treatments. The bruising on his throat faded to yellow-green. But the memory of that crushing telekinetic grip, of cybernetic fingers closing around his windpipe, remained vivid. Vader had been testing him, measuring his capabilities. The next encounter would be executed with lethal precision. Batman wouldn't face him unprepared again. The Moon Base's workshop became Bruce's domain. Alliance engineers watched with fascination as he disassembled and recalibrated his remaining equipment, adapting Earth technology to galactic standards through sheer determination and genius level. Problem solving. He fabricated new batarangs from durasteel alloys, refilled smoke pellets with indigenous compounds that sensors couldn't penetrate, modified his EMP charges to target cybernetic systems specifically. You're preparing to fight him again, Vecker observed, watching Bruce test a reinforced grapnel line rated for Starship-grade tensile stress. That's insane. You barely survived the first encounter. I survived because I understood his weakness, Batman replied, not looking up from his work. The life support, the armor, the cybernetics. Vader isn't invulnerable, he's dependent. That dependency can be exploited. The Force gives him precognition. He'll sense your traps before you spring them. Then I won't give him time to react. Bruce activated a new device, a sonic disruptor tuned to frequencies that would interfere with audio sensors. The Force might predict intent, but it can't block physics. Sound waves, electromagnetic pulses, kinetic impacts. I hit him with enough simultaneous stimuli. His precognition becomes useless. Senna entered the workshop carrying a datapad, her expression grim. Imperial intelligence just broadcasted a galaxy-wide bounty. 1 million credits for information, leading to your capture. Alive. Every bounty hunter, mercenary, and opportunist in the sector will be hunting you. Batman had expected this. Vader wanted him intact, wanted to understand what he was, how he'd arrived, what made him immune to the Force's influence. The Sith Lord was curious. That curiosity was a weakness to exploit. Let them come, Bruce said. I've dealt with bounty hunters before. But Mon Mothma had different concerns. She summoned Batman to the command center, where holographic projections displayed Imperial fleet movements across the galaxy. Something was happening. Massive capital ship, deployments to the Outer Rim, resource allocations that dwarfed normal military operations. And at the center of it all, the mysterious Tarkin Doctrine implementation phase 2. We've identified the construction site, Mon Mothma said, her voice tight with controlled fear. The Ender system. Imperial forces have established a defensive perimeter around the forest moon. Long-range scans detected. Something enormous under construction. Something that eclipses even the original Death Star. Batman studied the data, his detective instincts parsing patterns from incomplete information. They're building another superweapon. Larger, more powerful, and they want it operational before the rebellion can organize a response. We need intelligence from inside that construction site, Phalia stated. Specifications, weaknesses, anything that might give us a chance to destroy it before completion. You're asking me to infiltrate the most heavily guarded military project in Imperial history, Batman said flatly. We're asking you to do what you do best, Mon Mothma replied. Gather intelligence that saves lives. The Alliance is planning a major operation, but we need actionable data first. And after what you did to Vader, she hesitated. You're the only operative we have who might succeed where others would be detected instantly. Bruce considered the mission parameters. Deep infiltration, no backup, Imperial security at maximum alert, and the certainty that Vader would be watching, waiting for exactly this kind of operation. It was a trap, obviously, deliberately, the kind of trap Ra's al Ghul would design, layered, sophisticated, banking on the target's sense of duty to override their survival instincts. I'll need a ship, Batman said. Stealth-capable, fast, something that won't appear on Imperial scanners. We have a modified YT 2400 light freighter, Vecker offered. Smuggler-grade sensor baffles, enhanced engines, false transponder codes. Not invisible, but close enough. And one more thing. Bruce pulled up holographic schematics of Vader's armor. Data compiled from their previous encounter and Rebel intelligence archives. I need to know everything about Sith lightsaber combat. Forms, techniques, weaknesses. If I'm walking into Vader's trap, I need every advantage. An ancient Jedi holocron provided the answers, a recording of a long-dead master analyzing Sith fighting styles with clinical precision. Form V. Gem So, the domination style. Vader favored. aggressive, powerful, designed to overwhelm opponents through raw strength and relentless pressure. But every form had counters: mobility over strength, precision over power, exploiting the openings created by overcommitment. Batman trained for a week in the base's sparring chamber, practicing against remotes programmed with Vader's movement patterns. The lightsaber was a plasma blade contained by magnetic fields. He couldn't block it, couldn't parry it conventionally, but he could evade it, redirect it, force Vader to overextend in ways that exposed the life support systems. One chance, one opening. That's all he'd need. The YT-2400, rechristened Shadow's flight by the Alliance tech crew, broke orbit from the hidden moon under cover of an Imperial convoy departure. Batman piloted the ship personally, using traffic patterns and smuggling routes provided by Rebel intelligence to navigate toward the Outer Rim undetected. The journey took 4 days through hyperspace, and he spent every moment reviewing mission parameters, preparing contingencies, and accepting the reality that he might not return. Alfred would have called this reckless. Dick would have insisted on backup. Barbara would have calculated the odds and declared the mission suicide. But they weren't here. Bruce was alone in a galaxy far from home, facing an empire that could destroy planets, fighting alongside rebels who believed symbols mattered more than survival. He'd become their symbol, the shadow Vader couldn't catch, the void in the Force that refused to submit. And symbols, Bruce knew, were only as powerful as the actions that supported them. The Ender system appeared on his sensors like a wasp's nest. Imperial Star Destroyers in defensive formation, TIE fighter patrols sweeping every approach vector, and at the center, the massive skeletal framework of a battle station that dwarfed the original Death Star, the second Death Star, more powerful, more terrible, and currently vulnerable while still under construction. Batman transmitted the false transponder codes and maneuvered Shadow's flight into a supply convoy approaching the construction site. The freighter's sensor baffles kept it invisible to long-range scans, and the Imperial traffic controllers waved the convoy through without secondary inspection. Too many ships, too much traffic. The Empire's bureaucratic efficiency creating exploitable gaps. He docked at a secondary hangar bay on the battle station's lower hemisphere, sealed his ship, and disappeared into the construction site's labyrinthine corridors before security teams could respond. Thousands of workers, humans, droids, and various alien species swarmed through half-finished sections, welding durasteel plating, installing weapon systems, constructing the nightmare that would cement the Empire's eternal dominance. Batman moved through them like a ghost, cape obscuring his silhouette, cowl sensors mapping the station's layout in real time. He needed the central computer core, needed access to construction specifications, defensive systems, anything the rebellion could use to destroy this abomination before it became operational. The computer core occupied the station's northern hemisphere, protected by elite stormtrooper detachments and automated defense systems. Batman infiltrated through maintenance shafts, bypassing checkpoints, disabling security cameras with precisely thrown batarangs that severed power connections. Every movement calculated, every step bringing him closer to the target. He reached the computer core's outer chamber and prepared to breach the security door when the lights died. Emergency illumination activated, bathing the corridor in blood-red light. And from the darkness ahead, mechanical breathing echoed, slow, rhythmic, inevitable. "I knew you would come," Vader said, emerging from the shadows with lightsaber ignited. "Your pattern is predictable. You seek information. You infiltrate Imperial facilities. You believe you can cripple the Empire through intelligence and precision." The Sith Lord advanced slowly. "But you cannot hide from the Force. Even your void creates ripples I can sense." Batman didn't respond. Talking was a distraction. He fired a grapnel at the ceiling's structural supports and rocketed upward as Vader's lightsaber carved through. Where he'd stood, the Dark Lord reached out with the Force, attempting to seize Batman mid-flight. But Bruce deployed a flashbang that detonated directly in front of Vader's position. The Sith Lord staggered, not from the light, but from the concussive sound that temporarily disrupted his helmet's audio processors. Batman used that half-second to swing behind, Vader and launch a volley of cryocapsules at the life support systems. Ice spread across the chest plate, freezing regulators. And Vader's breathing hitched as emergency systems struggled to compensate. Clever, Vader acknowledged, turning with frightening speed. But insufficient. He unleashed a telekinetic wave that smashed Batman against the corridor wall with crushing force. Ribs cracked, armor plating dented. Bruce tasted blood but forced himself to move, rolling aside as the lightsaber pierced the wall where his head had been. He triggered the sonic disruptor, and high-frequency waves screamed through the corridor, sound engineered to cause pain in cybernetic systems, to overload audio sensors, to make Vader's armor torture him from within. The Dark Lord roared with rage and agony, but did not fall. The Force sustained him, dark power overriding physical limitation. He raised his hand, and Batman felt himself lifted telekinetically, body rising off the ground as invisible pressure crushed his chest. This was the moment. The trap closing. The inevitable end. Batman fired his grapnel not at Vader, but at the ceiling's primary support beam. The industrial strength line caught, and he triggered the explosive charge embedded in the grapnel head. The detonation shattered the support beam, and tons of durasteel plating collapsed directly onto Vader's position. The telekinetic grip released, as Vader diverted all his concentration to protecting himself from the falling debris. Bruce dropped, hit the ground running, and sprinted for the computer core's entrance. Behind him, metal groaned and buckled as Vader simply pushed through the collapse with raw force power, his rage manifesting as physical pressure that bent reality. "You cannot escape." Vader's voice thundered, mechanical and terrible. "I am inevitable." Batman reached the computer core, plugged in his data strike, and initiated the download. 15 seconds. He needed 15 seconds. Vader emerged from the wreckage, armor scorched and damaged, but still functional. Lightsaber burning with murderous intent. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, faster than should be possible, and brought his blade down in a killing blow. Batman caught the lightsaber's hilt with both hands, stopping the plasma blade centimeters from his neck. His reinforced gauntlets held, barely, against the weapon's magnetic containment field. Vader's cybernetic strength pressed down, inexorable, and Bruce's muscles screamed with effort. "Impressive will," Vader said, almost respectfully. "But will cannot overcome power." "It already has," Batman replied. The data strike completed its download and simultaneously activated its secondary function, a virus designed by Alliance hackers to corrupt Imperial navigation systems. Alarms blared throughout the Death Star as critical systems began failing. Construction droids shutting down. Security protocols collapsing. Vader's attention split for a fraction of a second, drawn to the chaos erupting across his Emperor's ultimate weapon. Batman drove his knee into the damaged chest plate with all his remaining strength, targeting the exact spot where the cryocapsules had weakened the armor. The impact sent feedback through Vader's life support systems, and the Dark Lord's breathing faltered. Not stopped, not defeated, but wounded. Bruce tore free, grabbed the data strike, and sprinted for the hangar bay as Imperial forces mobilized throughout the station. Behind him, Vader rose, his rage now transcending language. A pressure in the Force that made reality itself feel oppressive. But Batman had what he came for. The specifications, the weakness, the knowledge the rebellion needed. Shadow's flight launched from the hangar bay as TIE fighters scrambled in pursuit, their ion cannons lighting up the void. Batman pushed the freighter's engines beyond safe limits, weaving through debris fields and construction scaffolding as plasma fire seared the darkness around him. The ship's shields were failing, hull integrity dropping, but the hyperspace coordinates were locked. As he pulled the hyperspace lever, Batman caught one last glimpse of the Death Star through the viewport, and Vader, standing in the hangar bay, lightsaber raised in challenge and promise. The stars stretched to lines, and Shadow's flight vanished into hyperspace. The Alliance received Batman's transmission with jubilation. That quickly turned to horrified understanding. The specifications revealed a battle station even more powerful than feared, but also critical weaknesses. Vulnerable power generators, exploitable reactor cores, a flaw intentionally built into the design by a saboteur within the Empire's engineering core. This is it, Mon Mothma said, reviewing the data with tear-filled eyes. This is how we win. How we strike back against the Empire's ultimate weapon. She looked at Batman with profound gratitude. You did the impossible. You infiltrated the Death Star and survived Vader. Twice. I didn't defeat him, Batman said, his voice rough from damaged ribs and exhaustion. I escaped. There's a difference. A difference that gives us hope, Senna replied. You prove the Empire's enforcers aren't invincible. That even the Dark Lord of the Sith can be challenged. Wounded, forced to acknowledge an opponent. Bruce accepted their gratitude, with the same stoic silence he'd maintained throughout the mission. But privately, he knew the truth. He'd gotten lucky. Twice, Vader had been testing him, learning him, preparing for their inevitable final confrontation. And when that moment came, there would be no escapes. No lucky breaks. Just two masters of their respective arts, locked in combat that only one would survive. The thought didn't frighten him. It rarely did. Fear was a tool, not a weakness. And Batman had built an entire career on wielding fear against those who thought themselves untouchable. 3 months later, the Alliance launched their attack on the second Death Star. Batman participated as an intelligence operative, coordinating strike teams and ensuring civilian evacuations from contested systems. He watched from the Home One's bridge as rebel fighters engaged Imperial forces above Endor, as the battle station's super laser annihilated capital ships with casual efficiency, as victory seemed impossibly distant. And then, impossibly, the Death Star began to tear itself apart from within, its reactor core detonating in a chain reaction that lit the void like a newborn sun. The Emperor was dead. Vader was dead. The Empire's ultimate weapon, destroyed by its own hubris in the courage of beings who refused to surrender. Mon Mothma found Batman standing alone in the observation deck, watching the debris field spread across Endor's orbit. We won, she said softly, because of the intelligence you provided, because you faced Vader and lived to tell us where to strike. You won because people believed freedom was worth dying for, Batman replied. I just gave them the knowledge to make their sacrifice count. Will you stay? Help us rebuild the New Republic. We'll need operatives like you, people who understand that justice requires more than legislation and good intentions. Bruce considered the offer, watching the rebel fleet begin rescue operations and humanitarian aid deployment. This galaxy was healing, learning to hope again. They didn't need a shadow from another world haunting their new beginning. I don't belong here, he said finally. I have my own city, my own fight. If there's a way back to Earth, I'll take it. Mon Mothma nodded, understanding. Then may the Force be with you, Batman, in whatever galaxy you fight for justice. But the way home remained elusive. Months turned to a year, and Batman became a legend in the New Republic, the shadow operative who'd challenged Vader and survived, who'd stolen the Death Star's secrets, who'd fought for freedom, despite having no connection to the force that bound the galaxy together. He established a base on Coruscant's lowest levels, where the desperate and forgotten still suffered despite the Empire's fall, became a protector for those the new government couldn't reach quickly enough, hunted war criminals and Imperial remnants who preyed on the vulnerable, and trained a new generation of operatives who learned that justice didn't require force sensitivity, just determination, skill, and the absolute refusal to let evil triumph unchallenged. On quiet nights, Bruce Wayne would stand on the observation deck of his hidden base and look up at stars that weren't his own, in constellations Earth had never mapped. Somewhere beyond this galaxy, Gotham waited. Alfred waited. His family waited. But until he found the way home, this galaxy had a dark night watching from the shadows. And those who sought to replace the Empire's tyranny with their own would learn what Batman had taught Vader in their final confrontation. Some shadows cannot be conquered. Some wills cannot be broken. And some symbols burn bright enough to illuminate even the darkest galaxy far, far away. The legend of Batman spread across the New Republic like wildfire, the mysterious operative who existed outside the Force, who'd stood against Darth Vader and lived, who'd stolen the intelligence that destroyed the second Death Star. Some claimed he was a Force ghost, others an alien warrior from beyond known space. The truth remained classified within Alliance intelligence. known only to a select few who understood that some mysteries were worth preserving. Bruce never found his way home. The dimensional rift that brought him to this galaxy remained inexplicable, unreplicable, beyond even the New Republic's most advanced scientific understanding. But he adapted, as he always had. Gotham had taught him that justice was universal. It didn't require familiar stars or native worlds. Wherever the powerful preyed on the powerless, wherever tyranny sought to extinguish hope, there was work for the Batman. Years later, a young Jedi student at Luke Skywalker's academy asked her master about the Shadow operative who'd helped defeat the Empire. Luke smiled and recounted the stories, a warrior who needed no force sensitivity to accomplish the impossible, who proved that courage and determination could challenge even the dark side's greatest champions. Was he real? The student asked. As real as hope, Luke replied, and just as powerful. In the depths of Coruscant's underworld, Batman continued his endless patrol, a dark knight serving a galaxy that would never truly be his home, but had become his responsibility nonetheless. The cape billowed in recycled air. The cowl's sensors swept for threats. The legend grew with every criminal brought to justice, every innocent life saved, every reminder that even in a galaxy far, far away, some symbols transcend their origins, and somewhere in the Force, a presence that had once been. Anakin Skywalker reflected on the warrior who'd wounded him, challenged him, and ultimately taught him that power without will was nothing, that even the mightiest Force user could fall to an opponent with absolute dedication to their principles. The Force remembered, the galaxy remembered, and in the shadows where light and dark met, Batman remained, eternal, unyielding, and forever vigilant.